for email, if anyone's heard of it. Yeah, I was really excited about it, but I knew it was going to be a really difficult process. And I think just trying to get everyone on board with the idea of getting this sort of vendor, and I'll explain what it is in a minute. From the time I started talking to the salespeople to the time we signed the contract, that was a year. Even though it's not an ESP, it's not an ERP, it's not a huge platform, it's a solution that allows you to put your email templates into like a drag and drop interface, and anyone can log in and build an email, but you lock down certain parts of it so that your brand is protected. So a lot of larger brands, you don't have one team that sends out email, so you don't have that consistency. So you have to kind of use process management in order to make sure nobody does any crazy stuff and like takes your logo and puts like a smiley emoji on it, which that has literally happened before. We can't have that happen. So Taxi for Email will allow you, and sorry, this is a shameless plug for them. They're great. And I did really like the relationship that we built in the year that I was talking to them. That was important to me as well. They really do support enterprise brands, and one of their biggest case studies was they were allowing, I think, it was a coffee brand, to send out 64 different versions of their emails very quickly, because then you just drag and drop different sections, allow you to add merge fields. But the whole process, it was a lot of convincing people that this is something that you need to use, figuring out an onboarding plan, and then an education enablement plan as well for a lot of larger organizations where you have a large number of stakeholders. Education is usually a really big part of it. And Anthony mentioned adoption. There's often an adoption gap. And I knew one measure of success for me for this tool globally would be to make sure that the adoption gap was minimized. Because if I'm responsible for this tool, it's my budget, it's my money, and my reputation's on the line. And if nobody uses it, I'm going to look like an idiot. So that was kind of a huge part of the plan. And as I was leaving that company, my replacement, I told her, I was like, you better don't mess this up for me. This is my legacy. But I think that just goes to say, like, even if it's a smaller tool, like a lot of planning, especially the larger your organization is, and a lot of time needs to be spent figuring out how you're going to close that adoption gap and make sure that everybody that needs or can benefit from the tool is actually getting everything they need, education, enablement, support, etc.
So I want to jump in on a couple of things you mentioned, and more around decision-making process and ownership of the tech stack. Panel and folks in the room, how many of you as a brand are the sole decision maker for a tech stack that you bring into the organization? Meaning you have full control of saying, hey, this is the need, here's the solution I want, and I can sign the contract from a dotted line perspective. Anybody have full control over everything? Founder beer brand.
Jealous.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Jealous.
So maybe one or two. How about you guys on stage? Can you kind of go full scale and make a decision, sign, and go for it?
I mean, I go step one, step two-ish, but yeah definitely ends at step three.
At a larger organization, usually, if you're not on marketing ops will be like, "What are you doing? What's over here? What? We have all these opinions." And then, of course, your information security teams, potentially other teams as well. Your sales enablement, your CRM teams are going to be wanting to understand how this impacts their data. I mean, it's what does Serious Decisions call it? It's no longer a demand. It's like a demand unit. So it's like a group of people, and the larger the organization, the larger this group of decision makers, and we all kind of have to work together to figure out the right answer.
Go ahead.
Well, I'd say for my sake, I don't think that having a single point of decision would be good for me or my company. It'd be kind of cool, I could get something done really quick, but if I can't defend my decision to someone else who needs to sign that contract, then what's the point of making that decision? And so, yes, it slows things down, or yes, I have to get other people's opinions, but so often that other opinion is going to be something that can add value to the discussion. And defending your decision at least makes you think it out a few extra
Yeah.
steps. If I have to sit in a room and explain to my CEO why we need this and why we're spending X amounts of thousands of dollars, yeah, I should be able to defend it.
Document everything. Write everything down. If you don't have an RFP, just make sure you have an exact understanding of your problems and kind of what problems you're trying to solve, and what are the stakeholders involved, what data sources are going to be involved, et cetera, and so forth. Just write everything down, plan to the nth degree.
Yeah, and that was kind of hard to expound a little bit. That was, I kind of went to my director and kind of initiated hey, I think we need to consider, a shift here. Here's the reasons why. Then together we kind of put together that RFP. This is, nice. And then pitched it to our VPs and up the chain. And yeah, it was definitely lots of sharing ideas, but we had a lot of different departments that we had to make sure we're clued in, not just on the dev side, because that was a huge piece of it, but then also on the merchant side and on the brand side, and yeah.
So I see John walking around with signs and Steve standing up. So we're coming close to the end of our time. So one last question for the panel. As you're looking at technology out in the marketplace today, what is the one technology you have your eye on to potentially bring in to help you round out your current tech stack?
Oh, God. There's so many.
Just one. The most important, that you would say.
For me, probably like a data hygiene solution, something that could sit on, the front end of our website and just ping a server and make sure your email is valid, stuff like that. Just to kind of help, data's everything, right? We talked about this the entire time, so I would say that.
Great, Ryan?
I would say probably next in line is a loyalty platform. We have a great brand, and we have a lot of one-time purchasers, but the data shows that if we can get a second purchase, then it's a quickly cascading effect where a lot of our best fans have 5, 6, 10 pairs of Keen shoes. So so kind of helping to encourage that loyalty, and we have a pro program, so it'll kind of looking to expand that. And
great. Sean?
Say, for my sake, this is going to sound silly, we're really looking at options for a new CRM. And not that CRMs are new and exciting and different, but if you implemented your CRM, I don't know, for our sake, 15 years ago, things change. And even if you go with the exact same system, the structure of that data needs to change to the point where you might as well either consider the same system a completely new instance of it, or just get a whole new system. So, a well thought out CRM would be our next big step.
Great. Well, thank you guys for coming up and staying for the last panel on the last day, and everyone out in the audience for sure. I think we're going to open up for some questions.
Yeah, let's see if we have some questions. Oh, sorry. I just want to thank you guys because this was incredibly helpful to me, and I'm not going to redo my pitch all over again, but it's interesting to have you validate some of the challenges and complexities about buying technology and experiences with vendors. And Sean, what you said is really resonated with me because, again, if I told you how many meetings I sit in where we talk about how can we differentiate, what are we going to go to market with, what are we going to hang our hat on? It's not the technology. I compete against incredible brands. I have nothing but good things to say about the technology of the folks we compete against, but it is in the approach, at least in my opinion, both through the sales process, to Newt's point about trying to identify use cases and making recommendations on the right mix of products, not overselling somebody something they're never going to be able to use, but then also in the ongoing commitment to make sure that what you are selling, people are able to use. And being there and going through the tough periods like implementations, which are brutal.
Yeah, I can tell you from experience, big brands are usually pretty risk averse. And if you can show as a vendor, if you can show a use case in the same vertical, or even a competitor, that usually is a really good thing to do. It kind of helps appease some of that fear. If so and so, if IBM can do it, then we can.
Just one point on that, because I just said this to Marion. Like, again, and maybe this is helpful, but as somebody who's selling into organizations, when I get a request for a demo, we hate doing show up, throw up demos. Here's how you build a segment, and here's how you make an email. What really works for us and resonates with clients is when we can execute against specific use cases. So tell your vendor, ask whoever you're considering for 4 or 5 use cases, whatever it is, stuff you want to see happen, and have them demo it in the tool itself. Yep. And this way you can see.
Oh, yeah.
Into other people's stacks and other people's technologies. Yeah. How have you been experiencing that in the market, and how are you dealing with it?
I can speak to that because, when I worked at Red Hat, it was gobbling up lots of things, and then it got gobbled up, and then ADP does similar things. It's constant. So whether you're on the team that has to figure out how to merge, another data source into your ecosystem, or you're wanting to pull your hair out like that one meme, because an acquisition refuses to move off their ESP and use yours, and they're just digging their heels. It can be really hard, and for larger organizations, it happens a lot. And sometimes, you find out that some random people are using MailChimp to send emails and you didn't even know about. I mean, no.
How about when your vendors are merging?
Vendor mergers?
Yeah.
That's interesting. It happens.
I can jump in there. I mean, there's been a lot of activity within the ESP space over the last 10 years or so. And I think the clouds, I'll just categorize them as the clouds because everybody's a cloud now or some type of thing in the sky. They never work as well together as they did apart. And it's been a real challenge from an integration standpoint when you're using a technology, it's got its own dev team, it's got its own dev cycle, they're putting enhancements into the system, there's ownership there. From my experience, when it's been brought into a broader organization, that hyper-focus on that one specific thing changes, and sometimes at a detriment to the ability to get data in and out, share between systems that were once separated and now are joined. There's still challenges there. So I think as the clouds grow up, it will get easier, and it has gotten easier, but it's still a real challenge once those systems kind of come together and merge.
I think there's a fear, too, because if you're using a software solution, you're really, really happy with it, and all of a sudden it gets gobbled up by Oracle, you're just like, oh, my God. And Eloqua user, former Responses user, how is that going to affect the relationship I have with the vendors? Usually it's a smaller vendor, and then they get gobbled up by larger vendors. Is that going to affect, the relationship we have, the amount of support that I get? It's a serious fear, and I've been part of organizations that have left, done huge, ESP migrations for that exact reason. So yeah, definitely something on our minds.
I mean, I can actually speak to that because that was one of the not major, it was a large factor in why we decided to go another way, is we had a smaller that was bought up, and, our just level of service, we had an account manager, but it was more, his job was more about renewing and stuff, and It wasn't about coming to us with ideas. There was no strategic partnership there, and that's what I was really looking for, was kind of that relational, or that relationship with your tech companies. So
Yeah.
all your vendors out there, keep that in mind. As a on the brand side, that's a really, really important factor.
Who said that you sell experiences, not products? So when your experience is poor, you're willing to take the risk and go to another product that is maybe new and unknown, because the experience is so important.
Yeah, we've had a lot of issues with our smaller companies being gobbled up by bigger companies, and what I've kind of realized through my time working with all these vendors, it's just kind of par for the course. We at 3 Day Blinds, like I said, we take all the nice shiny new things, and it means often that we're testing small companies or startups. And if you're going to work with a small company or startup, I mean, let's be realistic here. That company's goal is most likely to be bought by someone. And just understand that going into it. Have that transparent relationship going into it. Understand that this product that you're buying into and hopefully the relationship that you're building may change, but also just at least embrace it while you have it. I mean, sometimes the startups are worth it. Just take that. You can, if you get in there in the beginning and you can be one of the companies that helps drive their strategic goals, in other words, they'll change their system to meet your needs, it can be worth it, even if that doesn't last forever. So it's just taking a chance and understanding that it's going to happen.
Sometimes like acquisitions can be positive. For example, when Adobe bought Marketo, I heard from a few people at my previous job that made them a little bit more attractive because they were already using quite a bit of the Adobe stack, and so potentially after years, when they would integrate the two systems, it might make it a little bit more of a seamless experience. Maybe even get a price discount or something. But yeah, it's not always negative, but sometimes definitely is.
I was actually about to ask that question. If anybody could say there was an instance where a merger of vendors actually worked to their advantage. Because in all the years I've been doing this, I've never heard a client say, "Oh, I'm really glad that my vendor got gobbled by somebody larger because that opens up so many possibilities for me now," which is exactly what their press release said.
I mean, like she said, I think give it a couple more years, and I think a lot of those clouds will figure out how to make those companies that they bought work better together. So maybe in a couple years. It would be.
George, panel, we're gonna move this over to a round table. Thanks, guys. That was a great ending for us.